My name is Haleigh Summers, and I'm a second-year Ph.D. student in sustainable agriculture. My dissertation is titled Geospatial and Economic Analysis of Conservation Practices in Iowa. As I'm sure many of you are aware, there are a lot of water quality issues in the state of Iowa. Here you can see in orange and red all the impaired waters in 2018. And these are mostly due to nutrient runoff from farm fields. So in an agricultural state like Iowa, we have a lot of nutrient runoff, causing a lot of issues. Thankfully, there are some solutions called conservation practices or best management practices, as shown in some of these examples here. These practices are meant to stop nutrients or pollution from leaving the farm fields and getting into the water. My dissertation is focused on economics and efficiencies of conservation planning, so being more efficient with the money from both farmers and the government to plan conservation. I also want to think about subfield profitability, so where should in-field conservation practices go? And finally, looking at geospatial modeling of conservation practices, so where have practices gone in the past and how can that inform where they're going in the future? This chapter is about quantifying and maximizing ecosystem benefits from spatial targeting. So if we have a watershed with all potential conservation practices, how do we optimize those practices for pollinators or water quality or profitability to get the most benefits or outcomes from our spatial targeting? Another chapter is thinking about this notion of subfield profitability, or taking areas of low yield or low economics and placing conservation practices in those areas to save money for the farmer. What I'm wondering is, how does that compare for water quality or for economics to areas that were chosen by software to be the most beneficial for downstream effects? My final chapter looks at where conservation practices have been placed in the past and thinking about the landscape attributes that these landowners are choosing whenever they decide to place conservation practices. And I think this will really help us understand how farmers are making their decisions and hopefully inform conservation practice siting in the future. One example of this is thinking about the placement of pollinator habitat. So pollinator habitat doesn't have anything to do with water quality, so there's no restrictions on where it can be placed in a field. So we would expect farmers to be placing pollinator habitat in areas that are the lowest yielding or have the lowest corn suitability rating. But what we found out is that's not actually the case, and so we're really curious to see why they're choosing the areas for pollinator habitat when they have no other restrictions. Thank you for listening, and I'm really looking forward to chatting more with you later.